Now I have to start by saying that I'm not a number one tennis player, and I've never been in the Davis Cup team either. But I'm going to have a shot today at trying to give you some understanding of our pulp mill project and give you some factual information about what our company's been up to for the last 3 to 4 years in Tasmania. The parallels in this debate on the climate change or global warming debate is very apparent to me, and I think that's something within the forest industry, and particularly with this project, that we've been tackling for a number of years now, is how to get factual information out into the ether and how to provide that against a media who is very keen on giving a one-way story. So again, thank you for this opportunity today to come along and provide some context. Just before we start, an overview of guns. You may not have heard too much about guns in recent times. You perhaps have, but we're Australia's largest hardwood sawmiller, largest producer of decorative wood veneers in Australia and New Zealand, a large plantation and land manager, which I'll speak a little bit about, substantial exporter of wood chips, which we'll speak about also. We own 9 to 10 hardware stores in Tasmania. We own a construction company, and we also own Tamar Ridge wine estates within Tasmania. And we actually own about 45% of the vineyards within the Tamar Valley. Just quickly on some statistics with forest and land management. We've got a very large freehold estate within Tasmania. We're the largest private landowner within the state. We manage about another 80,000 hectares of forest on behalf of private landowners through joint venture schemes, lease arrangements, private property purchase arrangements. Overall, we manage about 140,000 hectares of plantations, with most of those being on company land, but certainly in recent times the trend has been to establish those on private property under lease style arrangements. And we've had a program of about 10,000 hectares plus of plantation development, which is on either second rotation, so that's ex-plantation sites, or previously cleared land. Gunns has recently made a policy shift to not convert native forest to plantations, and that was instigated in the company about 3 or 4 months ago, and is quite a landmark shift in terms of plantation establishment. We manage about 40,000 hectares of reserves on freehold land and about another 40,000 hectares of productive regrowth forest on our freehold land. Just a map of Tasmania here, and you can see that we've got a lot of land that's showing the forest that we're managing across the state, and you can see that we have a presence in most areas of Tasmania. We have export wood chip facilities at the moment from Triabunna, from the Tamar or Bell Bay site, which is the proposed location of the pulp mill, and from Ridgeley, which is south of Burnie in the northwest of Tasmania. Alright, so moving on to the pulp mill project, and I suppose to give some context, I'll provide you with an understanding of why the company is headed down the path of putting forward this project. And you had a look a couple of slides ago at the profile of our activities within Tasmania, and you could see that we're a fairly diverse forest company involved in managing forests and then downstream processing of those forest products. But there was one thing missing off that profile, and it was downstream processing of wood chips. At the moment, we export our wood chips predominantly to Japan, and the industry in Tasmania has done that for many decades now. And you could argue certainly that it's been doing it for way too long. We are shipping these wood chips offshore, and those wood chips are made into pulp and paper products, and they come back to us by way of paper, which we readily consume without question. And I guess you could say, why are we doing this? Why are we exporting all of this raw material from Tasmania? Why aren't we involved in downstream processing? And certainly if you look back at the mantra of environmental groups going back before this pulp mill project was developed, It was all about why are we exporting raw material? Why are we exporting product offshore to countries like Japan, creating jobs in those countries and not getting involved in downstream processing? That's certainly something that, interestingly, hasn't been put up in the last couple of years since this pulp mill was put on the table, but it certainly within the industry thus far has been very much the focus that the public have been asking us to head down. We've headed down this path and hence getting to this point with this project. So we have a proposal for a kraft pulp mill, which is a chemical pulping process, and I'll talk about that in a moment, producing about 820,000 tonnes of air-dried pulp initially, total capacity of 1.1 million air-dried tonnes of pulp, elemental chlorine-free bleaching technology, and I'll talk about that also through the presentation, using both softwood and hardwood resource, predominantly softwood resource, predominantly hardwood resource, only about 10% of intake we plan to come from softwood plantations, and not using any old growth log resource. How does the pulp mill work? Well, pulp is effectively the process of converting wood or wood chips into raw fibre, the cellulose fibre. Wood is about 25% fibre. It's about 25% lignins, which is glues effectively, which are binding the fibres together, and it's about 50% moisture. And really the pulping process is simply about extracting out that raw fibre from those wood chips. I have some pulp here. This is pulp from Brazil, from the Veracel pulp mill in Brazil. I'll just pass that around and you can have a look at that as the presentation goes on. But it's a fairly innocuous style of product, which you'll see it resembles paper to some extent. It effectively is just fibre. To make paper, you then go on and put this back into a slurry, add fillers, which is normally clays, to complete and finish up with a bleached type of paper product. And that's the end of the market that our eucalypts and forest in Tasmania can support, is the high end of the spectrum as far as paper making is concerned. And so that's the product that we're proposing to make. I didn't want to go into too much detail here. There's certainly some material that you can get hold of if you want to understand how a pulp mill works a little better. But effectively you have wood chips coming into the mill, into what's called a digester, and under temperature and pressure you're really looking to extract out that fibre from that wood. As a result of that, those lignins that I spoke about, which are the glues binding the fibre together, come out of the product, and they can actually produce a lot of energy through burning in a boiler, through steam production and then electricity production. And that's why this project actually has a substantial electricity production component to it. The mill itself will produce about 180 megawatts of power. It'll consume about 90 itself and then put about 90 of surplus power actually into the Tasmanian grid. And as Don alluded to earlier today in his opening, that's more than enough power to actually supply Launceston at a peak demand period. So it's a lot of power. Talking a little bit about the actual location of the project, and no, we haven't gone and built it without our approvals. But it's amazing what the engineers can do in terms of providing a pictorial of the project.